Miguel, we got Perry on the line. What do you want to ask him?
I've been listening a lot of your podcasts, and a lot of the people want to know what can they do to take action from your point of view. What would you say to me and people like me?
That's a great question. I'm a new GP. What's the most effective thing I can do? I always recommend that if they want to become a GP, it's important to know how much money they could raise. If you have a less than 1 million prospective customers, you do sales instead of marketing. For syndicators, their customers is like 20, 30 people. So you only need 30 investors, 50K each. That's 1.5 million. That's your first go-to-market strategy. Get those 30 people.
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Very excited for today's show. We got two amazing guys on the line with us today. We got Perry Zheng and we got Miguel Diaz. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Absolutely. I know we just briefly discussed this. We didn't go too far into it, but all three of us were at MM5, Jake and Gino, 2 weeks ago. And unfortunately, you guys didn't meet there, but at least you're meeting here. So good to have you guys. Good to see you again. It's been all of 2 weeks. And Perry, you're going to be in the hot seat first today. So Perry, do us a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Perry Zheng. I live in Seattle. I came from a technology background. So I was a software engineer at Twitter, Lyft, and Amazon. And I became an engineering manager at Lyft and stayed there for about 6 years, joined as one of the earlier employees. When I joined, it was 300 people. When I left, it was 3,000 people. Wow. And I was buying single families during that time, even before Lyft. After having bought about 5 single families, I maxed out my debt to income ratio. Those single families are in Seattle and the Bay Area. And so I got into multifamily. In 2019, we purchased our first syndication as general partners. I raised about 3.5 out of the $4.3 million on the first deal. And that's because Lyft went IPO 6 months prior. And so my coworkers and my friends have quite a bit of liquidity. So I was extremely lucky there. 2020, we did a 408 unit. 2021, did a 236 unit. And then this year, we did a 208 unit. So right now, a little bit more than 1,050 doors. My specialty is investor relations, capital raising, and just kind of making some key decisions. And I have an amazing business partner that's more asset managing and boots on the ground.
Nice. Now, something I like to ask everybody is kind of the transition, so you talk about Lyft's IPO, and a lot of people did extremely well with the IPO, which happens a lot. What prompted you to get into multifamily?
I would say it's out of necessity. So first time I got into real estate was when I bought the condo in the Bay Area. It was a 3-bedroom condo. I live in one of the rooms. I house hacked the other 2 rooms. And then I start doing house hack in Seattle, actually with the current business partner. So I've known him for like almost 8-9 years at this point. And I keep buying one house at a time. In Seattle, it's a 5-bedroom house. I was living in 1 bedroom, rent out the other 4. So I have always been extremely frugal. And because I saw that if I keep my rents down, I can basically save, 90% of my income. I was making a lot, like part of the golden handcuff. And so going into multifamily was just that I saw the writing on the wall that I couldn't buy any more single families if I kept going like this. So it was a natural transition.
And I ran into the same thing. I had 2 single family homes, and my goal was to buy 1 a year. And granted, I could have got creative, and I realize that now. But, first year I made the goal, bought a single family rental house. Everything was great. The second year, bought a single family rental house. Everything was great. The third year, it was 2009, which was kind of a crappy time to try to get a loan. But same thing happened to me. I hit my debt to income ratio limits. And it was hard. It was really hard to get the next single family home. Unfortunately, my solution, instead of getting creative, was let's wait until I make more money and then I'll go back to the banks. But so same thing. It just took me, I think, a lot longer to get into multifamily than you did. So good on you, I guess. Let's talk about the first multifamily project you did, a little in a little bit of detail. What were some of the challenges you faced? Coming from a tech background. Two questions. How did your tech background help you? Number one, and number two is what were some of the challenges you faced?
That's a good question. So the first property was at 13.5 million, about $4.3 million of equity raise. And the thought process was we have a couple KPs and so on. So we have 1 million down. So we basically need to raise 3.3-ish. And like even if we couldn't raise from investors, our plan B is to add more co-sponsors, and also that we have quite a bit of liquidity in our hands, and Lyft just went IPO, so I have some liquidity on my hands. So the plan B is add more co-sponsors, or so the down payment was never really an issue. It will be nice if we raise all the money, but if we don't, then so be it. And that's one of the things I will encourage the listeners to take away is when you go into this multifamily, just evaluate what's the downside, what's the worst that could happen. And for us, we could easily project what will be the worst case. So there are a couple people that love coming as co-sponsors and just share the pie with them. And then worst case, I can put in more money. So that was good. The challenge, however, is it was my first time raising money, and it took about all 2 months of raising the entire equity. People know me from work, that I was a high performer and I was competent. They also know I'm passionate about real estate. But what they didn't know, the headwinds are, they are new to syndication. They don't know if this is legit. And then the second headwind is that what will I do differently now that I'm responsible for people's money instead of a single family? On the management side, we actually did a 7-unit apartment complex before that, and that was more of a joint venture. And so that went full cycle actually for a 68% return in 18 months. So that was pretty good. So we have some track record in addition to my single families. So I was leveraging that. And the fact that I was a high performer and that I was not going to disappear or anything, that gave a lot of people confidence. So I believe the first raise was purely just based on they knowing me. They probably still don't really know what syndication really is to this day.
And you bring up some really, really good points that I'd like to double down on. Is the first syndication that people do, people are relying on your track record. They're relying on basically you being a high performer. So they're going to look at you, they're going to look at what they know about you. And that's what most people are going to be investing in on the first deal. It's not your experience, because you had a couple of single family homes in that 7-plex, but they're relying on you and your personal credibility and your personal brand, right? That's what a lot of people are investing in. And I think it's a lot easier for people who are high performers to get that first capital raise than for people who are, just so at their job. Something I've heard a lot of people say is if you're trying to do a side hustle, make sure you're really hustling at your main job too, because that way people are going to see what you're doing. They're going to know that you're trustworthy. They're going to know that you're going to work hard for them.
100%. Well put.
So good on that one. All right. So you got into your first deal, and fortunately you were in a good position. All right. So as you mentioned, down payment, you didn't have a problem with down payment. You were just going to raise the capital, and if you didn't, you put a little more in. I think that's a really safe place to be. I think a lot of people try to overstretch and end up, having a hard time getting that first deal across the finish line. But something I call a lot like right sizing the first deal. Make sure that first deal is right for you. And I'm not going to say easy, make it a stretch goal, but something that is achievable. Anyway, that said, let's talk a little bit about why you like to do this and why your motivation, what I call your big burning why. So what is your big burning why?
My burning why is I want to achieve financial freedom. And I believe financial freedom, it gives a peace of mind to people. And when I was at Lyft, I was in a golden handcuff. I looked around. My directors were definitely in a golden handcuff. They are definitely financially free by any estimation. Yes, they still work. So I learned very early on that just because one is financially free doesn't mean they stop working. In fact,
Okay.
I'm financially free and I probably work harder than most people. It just means that they have the optionality of not needing to work. And they have this kind of almost carefree spirit of doing things because they're interesting. And they like their job as well. And before it was achieving my own financial freedom, and now I want to kind of bring that gift of being carefree and being able to do something that kind of serendipity and spontaneity into their life. I think it's a good gift for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I like it. Now, something that I've noticed a lot, people find a higher purpose. At first, money's the purpose. At first it's getting out of the rat race. It's a little bit more money, but once you get there, you have this higher order goals that a lot of people want to see. And I think most people end up doing what you're doing, Perry. It's like, I'm financially free. Now I'm going to start working towards these higher level goals. But love it. Love that you're giving back and you're definitely helping other people out. And appreciate you taking the time today to help Miguel out a little bit. We'll get into that in a couple minutes. But that said, usually I ask people what's next, but I'm going to go off script a little bit because something you've been creating in the last couple of years, the cash flow portal. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Let me kind of go back to my story. In
Yeah.
2019, we raised 3.5 out of the 4.3, and I raised, and that was 70 investors. I was preparing DocuSigns for them to sign the paperwork. They will sign it, they will send it back. I countersign it. Then I put all the information on the spreadsheet. Sometimes they invest 100,000 and they say, "Oh, I want to split this up, 50,000 as out of my IRA account and 50,000 as a joint tenancy." And I scratched my head. Okay, there's 2 more documents I need to send to you. I had this kind of like split brain. One half of the brain is I was working at Lyft. I was engaging with very, very powerful technology on a daily basis. And then the second other brain is, why am I doing this manual work as in
Excel
my syndication
spreadsheets
journey?
and yeah, DocuSign, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So then the next deal, the 408 unit, we use a large syndication software for all the capital raising. It was expensive and it was good, but it's kind of clunky. And then the following year, I started working on the second year, and then the following year I used my own software for the equity raise. So Cash Flow Portal is a syndication software that helps syndicators manage their investors' cap table, ACH distributions, document signing, K1s, email signing, communications, and just also manage their investors, what they can see on how much they invested, how much distributions they got. It's a system of record for the GPs and the LPs. So in 2021, I used my own software for the raise. And my investors, I couldn't disclose at the time that I owned the company because I was still at Lyft. So I was moonlighting for a year and a half. And my investors are, "Oh, I like this new thing better than whatever you were using last year." That was a big aha moment for me to quit my job. We applied to Y Combinator, one of the accelerator programs in Silicon Valley, like Dropbox, Airbnb, Instacart, DoorDash all graduate from the same accelerator. And so, yeah, now we have about 30 employees and doing pretty well, 20x our revenue last year.
Nice.
The moral of the story, though, is that you could start off by just wanting to achieve financial freedom by single families. Then I saw the writing on the wall, and so I wanted to scale. So I got into multifamily. And then I saw more writing on the wall. How many apartments am I gonna buy to self-actualize? And then I saw that my true passion is actually creating software that helps GPs be more efficient in their jobs, which in turn helps more people achieve financial freedom, because that's the massive impact I could have, not buying more apartment complexes.
Yeah. And I'll say something on our first syndication, we had a similar thing. I mean, I'm not savvy enough to create my own software portal. I wish I was. But on our first capital raise, we raised 2 million and we had, probably 35, 40 investors in there. And it was the same thing. It was, DocuSign, but we didn't pay for like the DocuSign, subscription. So it was like doing it individually and going in each time. And it was, I spent hours and hours and hours trying to get people to, sign the documents and then file the documents, and, made up a really cool, Excel spreadsheet for it. But I think what most people figure out is after they do their first syndication, they start thinking, well, that was a lot of work. Let me see if I can streamline it. And then they start looking for those software solutions. So, for everybody listening, when you get into your first syndication, do yourself a favor, call somebody like Perry and, see what their software does, because it's going to save you a lot of time on the back end. So, yeah. So anyway, congratulations on the success you guys have had so far. I know you guys have a lot of positive momentum going. I've seen you at a lot of the conferences. Oh, and for one more thing for the people listening, Perry does go to a lot of conferences as a sponsor now. So, if you're at one of these conferences, make sure you look for him. But all right. So besides Cash Flow Portal, what's next for you?
Personally, I spend 99% of my time on the company. And I like to tell GPs that, people who want to become GPs or people who are LPs, that the best way I'll describe is Cash Flow Portal is one of those tools that's waiting for you at the success line. Like, okay, I got the deal under contract. Now I made it. No. Your journey has just begun. There's so much work after you get the LOI signed. And we're almost waiting for you at the finish line. And that's where you have to pay extreme attention to detail with the investors, with the webinar deck. And I would love to lend my ears if you want to chat more about, how do you become a more effective GP? And the technology has a big part to play with that. So I spend 99% of my time thinking about the company, thinking about our customers. And by definition, I think about what do the GPs want.
Nice. Yeah. GPs want it to be easy is the answer. They want everything to be easy. That's a pipe dream though, but cool. All right. Well, we're going to shift gears right now and bring Miguel on. So Miguel, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for this opportunity, man. It's awesome. It's awesome to be here.
I appreciate you coming on once again. And like I said earlier, it was great meeting you in Orlando a couple of weeks ago. And I'm happy to have you here and excited to hear your story. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm originally from Venezuela. I left Venezuela almost 8 years ago and went to Costa Rica. My background as an entrepreneur, it's like about 12, 13 years ago, I decided to left my W-2 and then start importing goods from China and then go out in Venezuela to sell door by door all those goods, cell phone goods that we were importing there. So with that business, I moved to Costa Rica and I did the same thing because I already had the people in China to bring the goods instead of Venezuela, then to Costa Rica.
Nice. So I like that. I mean, that takes a little bit of doing, getting imported goods from China, turning around and selling them. So very entrepreneurial. Venezuela, Costa Rica, and where are you at right now?
Actually in Orlando. Then I moved here last year, not to Orlando. I got to Stewart, Florida. And then back to Orlando. I came here to last year. I just have 1 year here in Orlando.
Nice. How's it been so far? You living the U.S. dream yet?
It's been great. It is. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. Well, cool. So one thing that I like to ask everybody, what is your why?
My why, it's my kids. I have 3 kids. And I want to give them the choice. I think financial freedom gives people choices. I would like them to have the choice and show them as an example that when you commit to something, you can achieve it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, Perry mentioned this before, being financially free allows you to reach that self-actualization, is how Perry put it, but something that a lot of people are searching for. And, hopefully we can help a lot of people get. That said, hey, Miguel, we got Perry on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Yes, Perry. Well, first of all, congratulations, man. It's a nice story. You're doing great. Really.
Thank you.
It's an honor to meet you as well, man. Well, I've been taking action. I've been doing some network, as you saw me, Brian, back in MM5. I've been listening a lot of your podcasts and other podcasts as well. And a lot of people want to know what can they do to take action from your point of view. What would you say to me and people like me?
That's a great question. I'm a new GP. What can I do? What's the most effective thing I can do? I always recommend that if they want to become a GP, it's important to know how much money they could raise. And that's regarding if you're talking to brokers or not. You could talk to brokers if you want to, but that takes usually about 6 months of dancing around with the commercial brokers to trust you. But the one thing that I did is to create a spreadsheet myself that has literally 4 columns, first name, last name, and the expected amount that I think I can raise from that person. And then the 4th column is basically a percentage.
Yeah.
You can do that using your CRM, or you can do that with literally a spreadsheet. In fact, I will start a spreadsheet because it's very easy to convert that into a CRM in the future. And what that does you is that it materializes people's biggest fears. Okay, so that's one thing. Is if you always keep this in your head, then you never really put your fear out of your system. So that's number one. The second one of the best advice I've heard is when we got into Y Combinator and the first meeting, the partner told us that if you have less than 1 million customers, you do sales instead of marketing. Again, if you have a less than 1 million prospective customers, you do sales instead of marketing. For syndicators, their customers is like 20, 30 people. So you only need 30 investors, 50K each. That's 1.5 million. That's your first go-to-market strategy. Get those 30 people, regardless how you do it. So what that means is you may have to take them out to coffee. What I will suggest is like, don't ask for how much they will invest because they're not going to tell you. And especially if you don't have a deal. But just like tell them you are doing multifamily, you are underwriting, and because they're going to ask you what you've been up to, just tell them your passion. And if they ask more questions, that's a good sign. What happens in my case is that I joined a mentorship group in 2018. And it wasn't until 9 months later that we got our first deal. During those 9 months, I will be getting dinner with kind of the same group every month, right? So that's 9 times in which they ask me, have you gotten a multifamily deal yet? I know I just joined and we're still like making a bid and we lost. We got into the best and final, we lost. They're like, what is best and final? And so you start telling them how this thing works. And then they say, if you get a deal, let us know. So they saw that this is not easy. You cannot be like, hey, I have a deal now. And what happened in the last year? Oh, yeah, we joined a multifamily. That's too much of a ramp up for your friends. And so there are many parts to it. One is put that onto a piece of paper on a spreadsheet. Second is start building that relationship sooner than later. Because you don't want to be like, I got a deal and then let me tell you about multifamily. They just like, what is this? Yeah. Right. And you only need 20 investors. In fact, you probably only need 10 investors for some folks. And so I don't really believe in like creating this like amazing marketing machine yet. Once you get your deal, please create a marketing machine. But I don't think on your first deal, you need to do so.
Yeah, I think that was the perfect blueprint for raising money. Start talking to all your friends, tell them what you're doing. And then when the time comes, you don't have to re-educate them. I think it's hard to improve on that one.
Nice. Thank you so much. And what about the team? How did you build your team?
Different people build their teams differently. I could tell you my story. I met my business partner, Edward Sittler. He actually threw bigger pockets. I post on the forum. That was when I was living in the Bay Area. And we went out for dinner, for coffee. That one coffee became the coffee next weekend. And then we started meeting out every weekend. Then we tried to buy single family in the Bay Area. It was too expensive. So I moved back to Seattle and bought a house hacking property. And it was actually with Ed. So we bought like 2 or 3 single families already. And so when we joined the mentorship group, we joined in as basically as business partners already. I knew him for a long time and like we work really well together. So that's my story. Reflecting back on why I like Ed as my business partner is that he is more detail oriented. He is more meticulous. He likes to think and he does a lot of research. Whereas my superpower is that let's just do it. And so if I don't have Ed, I probably will have made crazy amount of mistakes at this point. And if Ed didn't have me, he probably wouldn't have as many units. And so that's the complementary skill set that we have. Yeah. Now, for other people, they may not have met their business partner serendipitously this way. They may have joined a mentorship group and then they start forming business partners. The advice I will give there is actually counterintuitive. Because you don't have that history of 2 or 3 years of knowing each other, I will highly recommend that you build loose connections with everyone until you get into a deal. And if you like working with that person, then create a company, between you two. But I will not recommend, like met them for 3 times and then, okay, let's build a company, because you are shutting the door for you to partner with other people if you don't have a strong foundation.
I agree. I hopped into a partnership. It's hard to look back, and I don't regret, but I hopped into a partnership quickly, and we did 9 deals together.
Wow.
And it was probably around deal number 7 or deal number 8 that I started realizing that we were going completely different directions. And it's one of those things where I agree a lot with what Perry said. On your first syndication, you probably shouldn't start an LLC with somebody else and, start partnering with everything else. I like the idea of that loose connections. Hey, let's work together to get our first deal. You work together, you get your first deal, you see how people operate, and then you decide, do I want to do a second deal with these guys? And they should be at the same time saying, do I want to do a second deal with Miguel? So from that aspect, you got to do a lot of hustling too. I would say, and Perry mentioned this, he didn't say this explicitly, but get around a lot of people who are doing the same thing. Perry did it on Bigger Pockets. He mentioned coaching programs, networking groups. Get involved with as many of those as possible and get to know as many people as possible in those groups, and you'll have a lot better chance of getting a partner.
Nice. Thank you. Thanks so much. Any books or guides that you trust or have done before that you might recommend?
The way I learn about syndications is I just check out YouTube. I think YouTube probably now has the best education. We have a YouTube, just search for Cashflow Marketplace and subscribe. To say shameless plug. The other book that I do like is Brian Burke have a book called LP Investing, or Things That the LP Needs to Know. I think that's
Hands-Off Investor, I think is what it's called.
Yeah,
Hands-Off Investor.
I do think that it's important to be a small LP before you become a GP. And I highly recommend people say, if you have, say, 50K to invest, try to ask if you can invest 25K with each GP. So then you have 2 GPs you invest with. Now, they could say no, then that's fine. What I also found is if you become their co-sponsor or if I were to start this all over again and I was not a lead sponsor from the beginning, I will become a LP and then I will ask my GP that I like. You get to know their true color after you invest as an LP, on like how detailed are their monthly updates, how well do they take their questions seriously, etc. And like if this is the lead GP that you like to work with, then try to ask them, can I be a co-sponsor on your next deal? So that's one way. And by definition, if you're an LP on their deal, they're obliged to teach you a thing or two to a large degree.
Got another question, Miguel?
Nope.
Hard for me to top that.
Yeah. It was a lot of information and really valuable. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pretend I didn't say that last thing because you originally asked about books and whatnot. What I'll say is I started reading books. I started devouring podcasts, and I started doing everything that I thought I should be doing about learning. And one day I just had this realization that I wasn't going to learn anything more from another book or another podcast episode. Mm-hmm. And I realized that at that point, I'm like, I've learned everything I can from these books and podcasts. Now I need to just get out there and start doing, right? So I would say probably the most important book is the book that you write. So I mean that's really it. The book that you write is going to be the most important one. So get out there. It's important to have people on your side who can guide you through the process. If you're getting into a deal by yourself and your lead sponsor, you're going to have a key principle, and it's important to have somebody that can guide you through the process. But I would say that the most important book that you have is the one you write, because that's the one that you're really truly going to learn the most from.
Nice, love that. Yeah. Man. Thank you.
Well, now, if you have another question, go ahead and hit it.
No, I think for me, that was it. I have a couple more questions, but he answered it in that valuable answer that he had. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's important because he's not only in the investment side, but he knows a lot of GPs through the program, the software that he has. And it's really valuable. It's really valuable.
Yeah.
And I'll
Um,
say something. A lot of people have come on this podcast, and a lot of people have done what Perry said, which is passively invest first. And a lot of people who have done that, and I wish I could go back and count the numbers and give you the numbers, but a lot of people that have done that ended up partnering with the person they passively invested with on a later deal, just like Perry said. So like I said, I don't have numbers to prove it, but just so many people have had that. Well, I invested passively in a couple of deals, and then my friends started asking me about it, or I started talking to my friends about it, and I realized I wanted to start raising capital for people. And so I reached out to that guy and said, "Hey, you know what? I've invested in two of your deals now. Can I bring my friends to the next one?" And that's how a lot of it works out. But yeah, if you're investing passively first, you're getting to know the sponsors at a different level, and you are creating a relationship, and they're more likely to let you in than some random person off the street.
Yeah, nice.
So
absolutely. Well said.
so cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here then. And I got one more question for each of you. Perry, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
If you want to learn more about us, you can email me at perry@cashflowportal.com, or you can just head over to cashflowportal.com, and on the upper right hand corner there is a link to schedule a call. So do that. We also have a YouTube, and you can follow us at Cashflow Marketplace, and you can search for that.
Awesome. And we'll have links to those in the show notes. So if you're interested in contacting Perry or interested in Cashflow Portal, check that out. All right, Miguel, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
They can learn more about me Instagram, MDSREI, and LinkedIn. I'm pretty much active in those social media.
All right. And we'll put links to both his social media profiles in the show notes for anybody interested in connecting with Miguel. And that said, guys, thanks for coming on to the show today. Very much appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I had a lot of fun.
Again, it's an honor to be with you guys, really.
Thank you.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call a Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.